Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's early Saturday morning and it is rainy, nasty outside, but we're back on the alternator welder. Only this time I actually took the little generator off of it and have this alternator on it. We're going to cut this off first off just to get it out of the way, because this is just extra where I built this thing the other day. This bracket is also temporary. It just happened to have the holes that lined up to keep tension on the belt, which it's really not enough, but it should work to test the welder part out. I found the original rheostat I had on here, but I've got to remember how it wired up to this, because it also used 12 volts. And I want to say it was in one side of the brushes, and then this went through the 12 volts. 12 volts went into here and then into that. It didn't do that. That does nothing. The only points I know for sure are these. One's positive, one's negative, and that's actually your leads. And it also did have a 115 volt outlet on this where you could run grinders and drills, and it worked great, and it didn't burn up anything. You could sit there and run stuff all day long. And there was one other thing I remembered. It didn't seem like it mattered how you flip these. It had the same amount of adjustment excuse me, had the same amount of adjustment on this. Now, all of this is going off of info that I got from the guy when I first built this setup. He actually let me have this alternator, gave me a little schematic of how he wired it up, and it worked. And like I said, it welded. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, other than the voltage or amperage control was never quite right. It never had just a lot. It seemed like it was either medium to high to high. It never had, you could never really crank it down low and get, 60, 80 amps out of it. It's always up 100 and above. But I just learned how to weld with it like that, and you just go faster, pull it further away from the steel, whatever. You can make it work if you know what you're doing. Anyhow, what we're going to do today, I'm going to get this cut off first. I got to find another bolt to go in here. It's going to have to be a long one, which is good because these mounts were the same ones for that generator, so I actually didn't have to change them. I just had to open the holes up, and then eventually I'm gonna have to get a piece of flat bar and cut a hole in one side and a slot in the other, and it really needs to be curved so that it doesn't cam around and get into the flat bar bracket I'm going to put on here. But that way I have some more adjustment, because right now the only adjustment I have is this hole or this one, and there's no way that belt will stretch far enough to go in that hole. This one will probably work for now. It's a little loose, but you got to remember, this is also one thing, it's the tooth belt, and another, this pulley and this pulley are a lot smaller groove than the ones I originally had on this years ago. So for right now, I'm going to put you in the case here, and we're going to get started taking this off, put a bolt in it, and then we're going to try to figure out how we're going to mount this other stuff and make it work. And like I said, we will have to run 12 volts to it in order for it to even weld to begin with, which I got batteries for that, so that's not a big deal. Put on the glasses, and we'll get metal shavings in our faces. you'll see that's marked positive. I don't know if you can see that. Hang on, let me get a light. Positive out, negative out. It's hard to read it, but yeah, that's when I got this from the guy. I'd already heard of alternator welders, and believe it or not, I even had one that was a factory-made little setup. I kind of wish I'd have kept it, and it only had, what did it have on it? It had like a 7 or 8 horse Wisconsin Robin gas engine, and it had this little tiny metal yellow box, and it was on a little setup with wheels. You could wheel it around, and it was no bigger than this that I'm building now. But it had just a standard little small AC Delco or Delco Remy alternator, and I got it and used it. That was the very first welder I took on a job when I was working for my brother-in-law. I didn't have anything. It was like, here, you can use my welder. He hired me to build stuff, and then I needed one of my own, so I bought this thing, and believe it or not, it actually worked on one job. And I remember we was up on a Skytrack or something, and I had this little machine up on there with me, and it worked, but it didn't weld really great, and it just got to where it just got worse and worse, and I just disassembled it. And then that got me the idea of doing this. That's when I met a guy that had one of those little Lincoln, I don't know what you call them, they had a little 85 amp. They're like the Bulldogs nowadays. Had a little 8 or 10 horse Briggs & Stratton engine on it. And I got to talking to him, and he's like, yeah, I built my own welders, and he was a contractor, and he showed me this thing in the back of his truck, and I'm like, that is crazy. That's cool too. So he said, here, I've got this extra alternator. I'll show you how to wire it up and make it work, and it's ready to go. And of course, this come right out of a truck from a wrecking yard, had the same diodes and everything. And he said, you just take this piece off. It had a little cover with the gel inside it, and it was basically your voltage regulator. He said, just take that off, cut all the wires, and you can put it back on there to cover this up. And that'll be your welder. So he gave it to me, and like I said, I brought it home. I used it for a long time welding. And then I eventually moved up in, when the diodes went out in this, then I ended up buying a welder. An actual big engine driven, I think it was an old Miller with like 3,500 hours on it. And I used it for another year or two, and then it got to where it wasn't running really good. It needed to be retired. And I sold it to a guy that was going to completely redo it, and got another Lincoln, a newer, well, it was an older model, but it only had like 49 hours on it. And I used it for several years, and then right in the big middle of a job, the board went out. I wasn't sure it was a board, but I was about 99.9% sure. Problem was, I was right in the middle of this big job building this huge overhead. And let me see. So I was building this overhead, and I had to finish it. As a bridge I built. There it is. So this thing's about 20 some I think 22 feet tall or something. Maybe not. This, I know this is like 15 feet from the bottom pipe to the top of the cattle guard. I built all this entrance, cut them. I had an old scissor lift. I actually put that on the scissor lift. I already had them saddled and used it to raise that up and lock it in while I welded it. But anyhow, so I'm building this overhead to close off this property because there was no entrance to it. And once I opened it up, I had to get it where he could seal it back up as quick as possible. So rather than take a chance of buying a board and it not be it, I just bought a brand new welder, which is the one on my truck now, the welding skid. And in the meantime, I ordered a board, put it on that 49-hour machine, and it worked perfect. I should have kept that machine because I had more settings on it. It was just an older machine with the exposed engine. No big deal. But anyway, so I finished all that up. with a new welder. Has a little in-ground cattle guard. The only change to it now is underground here. You can't see it. I did bore like a 4-inch hole, 4.5 inch, and put a drain pipe that runs down the property. Now there's some handrails I built. This is that same property with the overhead when I had to build a fence across here. There's actually pens in here now. There's a shed down here. There's going to be one down here. Then it's split up the middle. Snow on my trailer. That was what I put under that same scissor lift to make it mobile. Horse walker. That was my first little skid steer that I ever worked with. It was a little Mustang. It had a single T-handle to drive it. It did have auxiliaries, so they'd never been tapped into since this machine was new. Well, I tapped into it, put modern quick connects. This post hole digger is completely homemade. Y'all probably can't even see this at all. I apologize. There we go. And I ended up making, see, I had a bucket for it. I have this. I had a trench bucket, pallet forks. I even had a spool that you could take the bit off and put the spool on and roll wire back up. We'll go back to that overhead so you can see it. This was a fun project I built. This was the first time when I built this bridge. I started out using a torch. This is all I-beam. It's about 40 foot across here. It also has a built-in cattle guard with a drain. My cousin did the concrete work, and then he had this design, and he didn't have any way to build it or didn't have the time to, so he contracted me to build it for him, basically. So going off his drawing, I built all this. I changed it up a little bit, put some plates on every joint, and added like fake rivets to make it look like an old iron bridge. But I started out building this with a torch, and then I'm like, why couldn't I use my plasma out here? So brought my plasma out, ran it off my Lincoln welder, had a little pancake compressor, and I used it to make every cut on this bridge. And it worked perfect. And since then, I've never used my torch again. This was probably 5 years ago. But there's the cattle guard, and here's where the bridge actually starts. It's all painted black now. It's more for looks than anything, because you can see there's not much of a drop in the terrain there. And then there's that overhead that I had to go buy a brand new welder for. But it was worth it. All right, back to this one. Okay, I got some hardware. Some electrical terminals, and I've got the proper nuts for this. Put these back on though. So we don't have a problem with these coming loose. I thought they were metric, but on the bolt chart at Atwood's they were actually standard. And normally I buy, if I need a nut or bolt, I don't care if it's metric, fine thread, or what, I usually just buy a bag full because they're really cheap that way, especially at Atwood's. And that way I can build up my nut and bolt bin around here. Yep. That one.
is that one. Which I'm probably going to do these flat washers. What? I think my daughter hollering for me. I need to find some washers for that one. Let me put y'all on pause and go see what my daughter needs. So anyways, there's what the somewhat finished product looks like. Positive and negative. And I just have those, like I said, I was going to buy a Stinger rod holder today, but it's like, nah, let's just make sure this thing's going to work like it used to, and then I'll go buy an actual Stinger for it. So, let me pull up the diagram. And I'm going to need to get a battery. I might have to set this back in the floor. I also need to build something to get the exhaust from blasting on that, because that's not good. And I probably have one. Yeah, I did, but that may be something else we have to go buy. Let's see here. Field connections. Okay, so negative off the battery goes there. That don't seem right. Positive goes through the switch, and the switch goes back to the positive. All right, let's get this in the floor and see if we can't figure this out. So here's our positive, which should hold the rod. Negative, which is our ground. Now let's get a battery, preferably a hot one. I'm not sure that one's completely hot. I think it does have some use. We'll hook the charger to it. positive being the ground. Okay. Move that. Let's get a wire to go to that. The only thing that I'm really concerned about is the fact that this is only like a 5.5 horse. And the other thing, I do have the pulleys pretty much the same size as one another, which the alternator really needs to spin at maximum RPM for it to weld properly. So we'll see. All right, we're not going to plug that in until the engine's fired up and ready to go. Let's move this stuff. And we're going to start out with this little bitty 16th inch rod and move up from there. Well, I am surprised that little engine actually worked that well. Let's knock some of this flux off and see what the weld actually looks like. Yeah, it's really not that bad. That's hotter than hell though. Whew. I mean, that's not bad for just kind of throwing something together. doesn't feel like it's wired the way I had it before. May just be the connections, the fact that battery's not, you know, a big battery. Let's see if it, well, see, now it's showing 100. If you can see what I was talking about, it doesn't really seem to matter. It doesn't have any welding capacity through here hardly. But when you start getting up, then it starts having a little bit of adjustment, and you can see when I had it all the way over, it was really stressing that engine. But that's a good weld. That would hold something together for sure. So let's switch some stuff around. Like I said, I don't think it's going to matter which way these are. I think it's still going to weld the same. I mean, that's really, it's not the prettiest weld, but it definitely holds something. But it acts like it's hard to keep a weld going. And I know the way I had it set up before, it would, I mean, it had no problem starting to bead and holding it. I never had this problem where, you know, start and stop, start and stop. And that's running the 3/32 rod. Switching them isn't going to help anything. And it may just be that he put different diodes in it. I know they got heavier duty diodes that would handle more amperage. I don't know. I think the only difference, the only thing I can remember for sure, I had a toggle switch where you could leave this hooked up and kill it and it wouldn't drain the battery. And whenever you wanted to weld, you had to turn it on. So it basically I had it weld and charged, but it wouldn't charge when it was off. You think it would, but it wouldn't. I'm sure there's a way you could do it with another diode or something where, I don't know. But, like I said, as you can see, I mean, it welds. The other difference was, before, when you welded with it, you could definitely hear the difference in the tone because it had a real high-pitched, like whistling noise. If you go back to my old videos, I have a couple of videos where I had this exact alternator set up in like a little kind of makeshift homemade SA200 welder, and you could hear it like really whistling loud. That's because it was welding 3-phase 180 hertz, so it was a really high frequency weld, and I can't hear that on this. It could be just the muffler, it's not letting me hear it, or lack of muffler. Well, it's got a muffler, it just needs a different setup. That belt though is definitely holding better, because the way I had it set up on the old machine, you had to have, it had a wide belt, like a 1/2 inch wide or bigger, like a deck belt on a riding mower. It is that same type of material. And I think that's where I messed up on that. You had to have it super tight. I actually made like a little turnbuckle where you could have that thing so tight you could play a tune on it. Because if you didn't, when you hit the welder, it put a load on that alternator, it would actually slip. So, anyhow, there you have it, guys. This little 5.5, 6.5 horse Honda. And the alternator is a Lease Neville. And I was told it was a 270 amp alternator, but I don't think it is. I think it's a 160 amp alternator. I just have to get the numbers off of it and double check, because I think they did. I don't know for sure if they even made a 270. That's just what the guy that I got it from told me it was. But this is, I do know that's the easiest type to make a welder out of, because you don't have to do anything. These two wires actually went to the voltage regulator through it. And what you do, it's on here. If I find it, I'll put it in another video. It's just a little case that covers this up and has that gel stuff in it, and the wire's hooked into this. You just take that off, cut the wires, you can put it back on as a cover. And then positive and negative, or vice versa. You can switch them around. Either way, it still welds, as you can see. So we're going to do some more work on it. I'm going to fine tune this thing some more. See if I can't get it really dialed in. I am going to get on eBay and find the correct rheostat. I don't remember, there's a certain wattage and ohms that you got to have for it to actually have like the full adjustment, I'm assuming. And obviously I don't have the right one, so it only seems like it works when it's middle to all the way. And it does not use this third terminal. I don't think you can. I don't know. I need to look into this a little more. Maybe that's why it doesn't have that adjustment. Maybe the positive needs to go in here and come out. I don't know. If you have any ideas on that or tips, let me know in the comments. I know I haven't never used it before the way I had it set up. It's just been so many years since I've ran this thing as a welder that obviously I've lost the schematic. I had two schematics, I've lost them both. I did see them the other day in some paperwork or something, and I remembered saying, don't throw this away. You still got the alternator. One day we'll build this thing again. And here we are, and I don't have the schematic still. So, anywho, if you like the video, click the like button, subscribe. I've got more videos coming on this particular welder. Like I said, we're going to fine tune this, build a little nicer setup for it. Actually, we're probably going to leave this just like it is. I'll put the legs on it and wheels and a handle. I'm trying to make this where you could literally pick it up with one hand, set it in the back of a truck. You can kind of do that now if it had a handle on it. And I think even adding wheels and stuff like that, it's not going to add a lot if you just put little bitty wheels on it. And it really doesn't even need the wheels. You could actually just have 4 legs, because that's, again, the whole point, where you just pick it up and set it right next to where you're welding, where it also doesn't need that long of a lead too. Those little leads there are like 4 foot long, 5 foot. Well, that's all you should need. If you just, because you're not going to be making a living with this, you're just going to be doing little minor repairs or just homeowner type stuff. You could just set it right beside what you need to weld. So, with that being said, guys, I'm going to try to get this video edited and uploaded today. As you can see, it is raining, nasty outside. It's supposed to be like this again tomorrow, which I've got a birthday party for my daughter tomorrow. So I don't know what all I'll get done before or after the party. But I'm going to try to get this video uploaded today, edited and uploaded. Go check it out. Right there, you know it works. So now we just got the little fine tuning stuff to take care of. Alright guys, that was a much better weld, even though I curved it intentionally. I can weld straighter than that. I think I may know what the issue is. I think it's going to be our belt size. Or not belt size, but, well, belt size too, but pulley size. I think this one needs to be bigger. That one needs to be smaller, but we're going to leave that. I'm going to see if I can find a 6 or 7 inch. I wish I could remember what I had on that 13 horse. I think this was the size I had on the alternator, and I think I did have either a 7 or an 8 on the engine to make this spin faster. So we may go get another pulley later and try that and see. I'll have to build one because I'm sure they don't have any more of these that are already pre-made to slide on. I'll have to, and the other thing, while I was talking about the flywheel, if I could find some big thick piece of plate to go on there, even if it was this small of a diameter, the thicker the better, or the heavier the better. Actually, it'd probably be better if it was taller. I don't know, it shouldn't matter either way. I need that momentum because that helps when you're welding to keep the RPMs the same. So when you put a load on it, it don't just pull the motor down so much, it just kills it. But we'll play with that later also. So I think what we're going to need to do in the next video, I'm going to have a bigger pulley on this, not so much worried about the flywheel, we'll do that later. I'll put a bigger pulley on this where I can speed this alternator up. And that might also help with the engine and may let some of the load, I don't know. No, that's probably going to make it worse. The only way I think I could relieve the load is put this a smaller pulley and that a bigger one, but then it's not going to weld at all, hardly. So we'll put a bigger pulley there, smaller one there. I may get a 6, a 7, and an 8 and try the bigger one and go down from there. Or even a 5, 6, and a 7. That's a 4 inch on the engine. And I believe that's a 3 inch on the alternator. So we need to get a pulley. We need to get the correct rheostat, which I'll get on eBay and see if I can order that. And then we just got to work on getting this package in a little more compact area. It would almost be cool if I could mount the alternator on top of the engine, but I think that's going to be, one, it's going to be too top heavy, and two, it's going to be really awkward to carry because that's going to put it up about 2 foot tall or more. It is really coming down. It has not stopped all morning. We're going to end up with another at least 2 inches out of this, if not 3 or 4. But also, I forgot I had this little thing. I bought this on eBay several years ago. It's a little, it was supposed to be a 110 powered welder, but I wired a plug on it, a 110 plug, and it wouldn't even, just barely sparkle. So I changed it, put a 220 plug on it, and lo and behold, it works fine. And I know this screen's flipping that y'all are watching, but it's set at 140 amp. And there's all kinds of settings: hot start, frequency, force, galley, VRD, and then you can adjust the amperage. I mean, it'll go 140 amp is a little unbelievable for this. But that's what that weld is. That's with that machine at 140 amp. So it would work in a pinch, but then you got to have 220 to run it because 110 won't cut the mustard. So we're going to shut this thing off. sure why it just powered itself back on. Even came with this neat little case. That's probably a dang brown recluse. You can't really tell. And here I've been just fiddling around with this thing. The main reason I bought that is because it was supposed to be 150, 110 volts. And I thought it'd be nice just to be able to run that off a cord. Even if it was a heavy extension cord, I could plug it into the little yellow generator I got, which is technically a welder too. But if I just needed to make some little welder repair, I could just plug that into somebody's outlet at their house and work on their gates or whatever. But 220 plug is going to be a little harder to find unless you have a dedicated generator that runs 220 volts. Or a dryer plug or something like that. And then you got to get into somebody's house, and it's at that point it's just like bring the Lincoln. But this little project is more kind of a toy than anything, but I want it to be a functional toy. So we're gonna do the fine tuning on it. Like I said, we'll get the pulley, get the correct rheostat, and we're going to go from there, guys, and see what it does. And I'll make another video, and hopefully by then I'll have the frame a little better. We'll have it where it sits on some legs or wheels or whatever we're going to do, and have it a little more functional. Have something to hold the leads out of the way, or maybe even have something to wrap them up on. But that's it for now, guys. Thank you for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video. There's going to be more. And now I'm going to have to get a GoPro for sure. There's little spots all over this from dingleberries from welding earlier when I had it up here. But, oh well, I need one anyways, so I can do the wireless mic thing. Anyways, guys, go check out my channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like, leave comments, and we'll go from there. Later.